Namaskar everyone. Myself Gaurav Singh. I am going to be the host for today's webinar. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all our viewers across the globe for this webinar. This webinar is presented to you by the American Academy of Yoga and Meditation in association with Consulate General of Atlanta, Dr. Swati Kulkarni, on the auspicious occasion of Youth Day and the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Ganges Mississippi Dialogue, or GMD as we call it, is a social platform under AYM through which we deal with three issues: education, healthcare, and economic challenges. Through a series of talks, seminar, and live chat shows by eminent personalities, AAYM endeavors to bring together the think tank of the world. This is a series of dialogues with people as a part of an exploration into the nature of this universe and its knowledge system from the perspective of modern science and Indian philosophy. On the birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, we have come up with an exclusive webinar known as The Bridge Between the East and the West. A great contribution of Swami Vivekananda was that he was instrumental in ending India's cultural isolation from the rest of the world. He was India's first great cultural ambassador to the West. His teaching and philosophy are reinterpretation and synthesis of various strands of Hindu thoughts, most notably classical yoga and Advaita Vedanta with Western knowledge and universalism. It gives me great pleasure to introduce a team of distinguished panelists. Our first speaker for the day is Swami Atma Priyanandji, Pro Chancellor, Ramakrishna Mission, Vivekananda University. Our second speaker of the day is our very own Dr. Indranil Basure, cardiologist and cardiac electrophysiologist, adjunct professor at the University of Memphis. He is also the chairman of AAYM. We also have with us Brother Sankara. He is resident minister, Vedanta Center of Atlanta. We are grateful to have Dr. Ravindra PN with us. He is the moderator of today's webinar. He is Associate Professor, Department of Neurophysiology, Center for Consciousness Studies, NIMHANS. Over to you, Dr. Ravindra.
Thank you, Gaurav. Good evening and greetings from India. On this auspicious occasion of 159th birth anniversary of Swami Vivekananda, it's a very honor for me to moderate this prestigious webinar, and I thank American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, Dr. Ray specifically, and others who are involved in this Kansas and Mississippi dialogue. So we have two wonderful, highly learned speakers who will be sharing their views on what is the contribution of Swamiji on synthesizing the concepts from the East and the West in general, and much more so in understanding the consciousness very much specifically. So all of us, we know that Swamiji stands for synthesizing East and West, past and the future, and the best of the East and the best of the West is what his the core principle was for both the individual spiritual development, for the social consciousness, and also for the in larger sector as the nation development also. So as far as the consciousness is concerned, the modern day scientists have just started unraveling their or just started the journey to unravel the mystery that has been long been debated across the philosophical schools in India. As far as, say, the working definition of consciousness, even though there is no a proper definition of consciousness, but from the science perspective, one of the probably the one of the thing is that consciousness is an experience wherein different faculties of mind, they are seamlessly integrated. This will give one way of, say, a proper, a working hypothesis to which the many, uh, especially from the biological sciences, people have started working on this. Even though we have both this a mundane level of consciousness to the mystical level of consciousness, the mystery of the first person experience still persists, and the modern day approach to understand the subjective experience, we can say it was started with Francis Crick and Christoph Koch, with the premise that whatever the experience that we have, it can be decoded by the activity that happens in the brain or in the neural network. This was the premise in which they started, and many theories have been developed. Among them, two prominent theories are the global workspace theory and the information integration theory. Even though these are the plausible theory to try to understand how the different experiences can be seemingly integrated, where we get a subjective experience, till still the basic question or the anchor in which all the conscious experiences or the consciousness that anchors to is the sense of self or the I-ness. So I feel that even at this point of time, no theories, either from the biological science or from any other branch of science, are anywhere near to solve this, how this sense of self or the sense of I has been really, it is been generating. In contrast to this, though a lot of debates have been happened in the Indian philosophical system about the consciousness, but the premise in which these debates are happening is the uh, on the premise that the the sole reality that exists in the world is about the divine consciousness, and the projection from these divine consciousness is what that we perceive or that we feel. So there is a lot of differences between the philosophy of mind from the modern psychology or the neuroscience perspective and the philosophy of the mystical experiences. How these things has to be bridged. Probably what is the unique contribution of Swamiji in trying to understand or to bridge these two, and how to go or move forward on the based on, say, Swamiji's uh, uh, way of synthesizing both the philosophy of mind from the modern psychology perspective and the philosophy of the mystical experiences from the philosophical perspective, probably will set a stage for the whole of consciousness understanding, especially from the modern research point of view. So, with this short prelude, I would like to give invite most revered Swami Atma Priyanji Maharaj to share his views on the topic. I am very extremely happy and to introduce Swami Atma Priyanji Maharaj. So he's a pro chancellor of Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Education University at Belur Math. Earlier, he was the vice chancellor. As a vice chancellor, he has been a great builder of this university, where the university has been focused on the gap areas to impart training to the students, where these areas are normally has not been taught in the general universities. So, considering the unique contribution of Swamiji in developing this university, so university has been awarded as a full membership for the Global University Network for Innovation, which is a Europe-based a global organization in the networking of the universities, which has a social commitment. And Swamiji is the best person probably to talk on consciousness because of his background in physics, where he earned his PhD in physics from Chennai IIT, and then being inspired by the philosophy of Holy Trio, he has devoted his whole life for the in Am I audible?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Swamiji, I cannot see anybody. That's why. Thank you. Yeah. So
You mentioned
and
did you go to a different state of consciousness or?
no, Swamiji. No. Because I was seeing I mean, on you, and suddenly, it was it disappeared. That's why I don't know what has happened. Okay. So Swamiji is a renowned educationist, and his interest is to realize the Swami Vivekananda's vision on education, yoga, Vedanta, and also on the consciousness studies. And Swami Vivekananda's vision to integrate both East and West from the academic atmosphere has been realized by Swami Athapriyanji's effort to build this university, and also under his leadership, the Swami Vivekananda Center for Consciousness Studies has been started even at our Belur Met University also. And he has traveled extensively, lecturing and conducting workshop on various aspects of integrating both science and Vedanta. So, on the behalf of organizers and all of you, I welcome Swami Atma Priyanji Maharaj to share his views. Swamiji.
So may we begin with the traditional peace chant, the Shanti mantra. Om Yaschandasa Vrishabho Vishwarupah Chandobhyodhyamritaat Sambhavuva Samendo Vedaya Aspranoto Amritasya Devadharano Puyasam Shariram me vicharshanam Yukva me madhumattama Karnabhyam Muni Vishruvam Brahmanas Koshosi Vedaya Pita Shrutam me Gopaya Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. I'm delighted to be here at this webinar conducted by the American Association of Yoga and Meditation today on consciousness and the role of Swami Vivekananda in exposing Western concepts to the Eastern concepts and consciousness to the Western world. Here I recall a very interesting statement that Swamiji made in a letter. He writes about what is his work: to put Hindu ideas into English and then make out of dry philosophy and intricate mythology and queer, startling psychology, a religion which shall be easy, simple, popular, and at the same time meet the requirements of the highest minds is a task only those can understand who have attempted it. The dry, abstract Advaita should become living, poetic in everyday life. Out of hopelessly intricate mythology must come concrete moral forms. And out of bewildering yogism must come the most scientific and practical psychology. And all this must be put in a form so that a child may grasp it. That is my life's work. It's a very remarkable statement that Swami Vivekananda wanted to present all the ancient wisdom of Indian sages and saints acquired through direct experience, experimentation, investigation for millennia upon millennia and documented, handed down to us through generations of Guru Sishya Parampara, the master disciple relationship. And he says, I want to give them very simple truths in the simplest of language so that people, even a child, may be able to grasp it. On another occasion, he wrote on the same day, another letter he wrote on the same day, I want to give them, means the Westerners, hard, dry reason soaked in the sweetest syrup of love, made spicy with work, and cooked in the kitchen of yoga so that even a baby may easily digest it. The jnana, bhakti, karma, and yoga harmoniously blended into a cocktail, as it were, and served to everybody so that it is easily digested. Swami Vivekananda pioneered this union of science and religion. In a lecture on Jnana Yoga delivered in London, he says, science and religion will meet and shake hands. Poetry and philosophy will become friends. This will be the religion of the future. And if we can work it out, we may be sure that it will be for all times and all peoples. This is the one way that will prove acceptable to modern science, for it has almost come to it. Remember, Swami Vivekananda did not have the advantage of knowing about the theory of relativity, the general theory, and the special theory of Albert Einstein. The special theory came in 1905, 3 years after Swami Vivekananda passed away, and the general theory in 1915, 13 years after Swamiji passed away, and the quantum theory due to Max Planck was mooted in 1900, just on the eve of Swami Vivekananda's passing away. And as everybody knows now, the theories of relativity due to Albert Einstein and the quantum theory, followed by wave mechanics by Schrödinger, quantum mechanics by Heisenberg, and the quantum theory itself by Max Planck, completely revolutionized a human being's idea of space, time, and causation and matter. So, what science did is to integrate space, time, and matter. Einstein was asked once, what is the contribution of relativity? Can you tell us in simple language? Einstein thought for a while and said, the Newtonian classical physics said, if all the matter from the universe vanishes, space and time alone will remain, as if space time are the container and matter is contained in it. Einstein said it is not a container contained relationship between space time and matter, but space time matter form a continuum. So you said if all the matter in the universe vanishes, space time will also vanish. So space, time, matter form a continuum. We discovered this long ago in India and added one more dimension, consciousness. The Vedanta can be described as a science of space, time, matter, consciousness continuum. There are three fundamental common principles through which science as well as spirituality and philosophy have developed. One, the classification principle. Two, the generalization principle. And three, the unification principle. Human mind has an uncanny capacity to classify things. The most famous example in chemistry, which we have studied in school, is a periodic classification of elements. 92 elements came to be discovered, and people started wondering how to classify them. They classified them, as you know, into groups and periods. The Loser layer and Mandalay for two people whose names are associated with this classification. The periodic classification of elements. Similarly, ancients were master classifiers. Suppose I ask you, what do you want in life? You will throw up your hands and say, oh, I want so many things. Can you classify all your wants, aspirations, artha, that which you are looking for? That's called purushartha, purushena arthita. Our ancients classified the purushartha into four: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. These are the four things which human beings seeks. The first three form a group called abhyudaya, worldly prosperity, and the fourth is called nishreyasa, freedom. Second is the generalization principle. Swami Vivekananda mentioned this in his famous talk, Reason and Religion, where he says that religion should also subject itself to scrutiny like secular sciences. Through that scrutiny, if religion goes, the whole of it or part of it, let it go. He was so bold to assert it. A religion cannot shy away from scrutiny, claiming superiority over science because it deals with transcendental objects. And he shows that the science of Vedanta, the ancient Sanatana Dharma in Hinduism, alone can stand the test of this scrutiny in the modern times. He said there's a huge vacuum in the West. The doctrines of the church, with no scientific basis, are crumbling down. His famous, powerful words were, and the sledgehammer of modern scientific discoveries, the doctrines of the church is getting pulverized like pieces of porcelain. Vedanta alone should step in and give a rational scientific interpretation of the science of consciousness. The generalization principle means you generalize from the particular to the general, general to the more general to the most general or universal. He gives the example when Newton saw an apple fall, he did not consider it to be an isolated incident. Then he said, apples fall, stones fall, every apple falls. Can you generalize it? We went on generalizing, ultimately finding out the universal law of gravitation. So every particular incident of a falling has to be thought of as a specific instance of this generalized law called the law of gravitation. The third principle, which is most important, is the unification principle. This is the basis of Vedanta, particularly the Advaita Vedanta. Everything is unified. There is no hiatus in nature. There is an amalgam, a unification, an integral approach which nature and God has taken. In the modern times, these three have been pursued by science, and the scientific development is reflected respectively by the principle of pattern recognition. In computers, very common, it's called CVPR, computer vision and pattern recognition, classification principle. The generalization principle leads to discovery of universal laws in science, and the unification principle refers to what Einstein unsuccessfully attempted, unified field theory. And now we talk about theory of everything, TOE, and the superstring theory, which scientists are even now researching into, is an attempt to find out a theory which can be an answer for everything. Now we have the IoT, Internet of Things. The idea of Internet, that everything is unified in the form of web, www, the World Wide Web, was thought of in the Upanishads long ago. Yathornana visrijate grinhate cha. Urnanabhi means a spider which spins a web. So these ancient quests of the human mind are based on the above principles, rooted in the eternal Indian wisdom, Sanatana Hindu Dharma, which Swami Vivekananda exposed to the Western world. I'll quickly go through these four important quests. The quest for unity, which subsumes the microcosm, macrocosm, dynamic equilibrium. It's called Ekatva Vijnana. Eka Vijnanena Sarvam Vijnanam. This is Chandogya Upanishad. Kasmin nu bhagavo vijnate sarvamidam vijnatam bhavati. Chandogya Upanishad. Ekena sarvam vijnatam syat. By knowing the one, everything can be known. What is that master key? What is that one principle by knowing which all other particulars can be understood or realized? This quest is predominant in the Upanishads and the Vedanta, and Swami Vivekananda had a wonderful experience in Almora, in which he saw the microcosm and the macrocosm have a dynamic equilibrium, and they are made in the same plan. He wrote down in a notebook later on, I have realized the union or the unity of the microcosm and the macrocosm. I have seen the entire universe in an atom. Kathopanishad talks about the Atman as anoraniyan mahato mahiyan atmasya jantor nihato guhayan. It is the smaller than the smallest, and at the same time it is the bigger than the biggest. The macro and the micro are built in the same plan, and the modern science is struggling to get this. On the one hand, you have the laws which govern the microcosm, the quantum world, the smallest of the smallest. And on the other hand, you have the macrocosm, the celestial objects, which are governed by the law of gravitation. These two are hanging loose, they are not coming together. Einstein attempted it unsuccessfully. Even now, the string theorists are attempting, they're calling it quantum gravity. So we realized it long ago that the microcosm and the macrocosm built in the same plan. The idea is the economy of nature will not allow nature to have two sets of rules and laws for the micro and the macro. Second quest of the human mind, quest for a continuum of matter, life, mind, consciousness. Space, time, matter form a continuum, as Einstein proved. Now we have space, time, matter, life, mind, consciousness. The Taittiriya Upanishad talks about it as Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya Atma. 5 dimensions are there for the human personality. The Annamaya is space, time, and matter. Pranamaya is life. Manomaya is mind. And consciousness begins with Anand Vijnanamaya and ends in its cosmic infinite dimension in the Anandamaya. And then we have the quest for interconnectedness, oneness of existence, and Kasmin Khalu Odascha Odascheti, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Shankara's commentary on that, Akshare Sarvasyapi Otaprota Bhavaha. Where is it that everything is Otaprota? Otaprota is a very expressive term in Sanskrit, which could be roughly translated interpenetrated, interconnected, becoming one, amalgamated into one. What is that principle into which everything is amalgamated? The answer given is the Brihadaranyaka. In the Rakshara Brahman, the supreme reality, everything is connected. And in divisibility of knowledge, we have broken up knowledge into several pieces: physical sciences, life sciences, mental science, etc. Ancient wisdom of the Upanishads, the Vedanta, the eternal Sanatana Hindu Dharma, it says knowledge is one. The Mundaka Upanishad says, Dve vidye veditaive parachaiva paracha. Paravidya is the supreme knowledge of the spiritual reality. Aparavidya is the knowledge of the world. The Bhagavan talks about in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 13th chapter, as Kshetra and Kshetrajna. They form one knowledge continuum. The third quest is the quest for the infinite. This is an underpinning urge in the human heart. It's called Bhuma Vijigyasa. Chandogya Upanishad says, Yad Bhuma Vaitat Sukham Na Alpe Sukhamasti. Bhuma Tu Eva Vijigyasitavya iti Bhumanam Bhagavo Vijigyasa iti. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Brahman is truth, Brahman is consciousness, Brahman is Anantam or infinite. Why is the human mind so restless, constantly seeking everything outside? Is because a human being cannot be satisfied with anything which is small, which is trifling. It wants to go and reach the infinite. The urge to reach the infinite takes the form of restlessness of the human mind. Once you reach the Bhuma, the infinite, the vast, illimitable, then only you get knowledge, then only you get joy. There cannot be any joy in anything which is small. The fourth quest is a quest of Mahashakti that is working through nature. Science has discovered it. Science call it nature, and science says that nature is working remarkably. Nature in various aspects. The materialistic sciences talk about nature in the physical sciences. Then you have the pranic sciences, the biological sciences, you have the mental sciences, and then the science of consciousness, beyond even the mind. And there is a huge power which is working through all this, through nature. Shankara's Bhashya in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 4.4.28, Brahma Shaktya Adhishthanam Hi Chakshuralinam Darshanadi Samarthyam Swatah Kashtha Loshta Samani Hitani Chaitanyatma Jyotihi Shunyani. Suppose you leave out the Chaitanyatma Jyoti, the consciousness, all the various senses, the body, are simply like wood and stone, and the Brahma Shakti is the Adhisthana, the power of nature. So here we can recall Einstein's quote about religion. Einstein says, "My religion consists of humble adoration of an illimitable intelligence which our dull faculties can comprehend only in the most primitive form." So you see this statement. There's a huge, illimitable, infinite, enormous intelligence which is working through nature. We do not know what is the nature of this intelligence, and Vedanta calls it Satyam Jnanam Anantam, calls it the Atman or Brahman. And the scientists of a very high order, like Albert Einstein, have realized that nature is so extraordinarily beautiful. Four particular qualities are mentioned about the supreme being in India, Sanatana Dharma, the Hindu Dharma. Satyam Shivam Sundaram. It is truth, constant, invariant. Shivam, auspicious. Sundaram, beautiful. What is beauty? Beauty is that which has a pattern. There is symmetry, there is extraordinary beauty in nature, and there is an illimitable intelligence which is capable of putting all this in place. We do not know the nature of this intelligence. We can only bow down our heads in a humble adoration. And that adoration, Einstein says, is my idea of religion. The last quote is also a very, very profound quotation by Einstein. The most profound and the most sublime experience that one can have is the sensation of the mystical. It is truly the source of all science. A person who is a stranger to this emotion, who can no longer marvel and work, wonder, and wrap awe, is as good as dead. To know that what is impenetrable really exists, manifesting itself is the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty that our dull faculties can comprehend only in the most primitive forms. And this knowledge, this realization that constitutes true spirituality. He ends with a very, very profound mystical statement. This cosmic, religious, and mystical consciousness is the noblest mainspring of all scientific research. Here you should remember that those who dismiss religious and mystical consciousness as something which is unnatural, which is unrealizable, will remember that most of the greatest scientific discoveries have come from beyond the mind. I'll just quote two. One is Kekule. Kekule was a chemist, as you know. He was grappling with the nature of the structure of benzene. He knew the aliphatic compounds, the linear structure. His mind was so conditioned to linearity, he could not come to terms with anything beyond that. So he was very deeply absorbed. Suddenly he fell into a kind of a trance or a vision or dream, call it what you like, where he saw a dragon made of carbon atoms. And this dragon opened his mouth and was biting its tail. He woke up, eureka feeling, and said, "Ah, that's it." The cyclic nature of benzene, and the rest is history. The second example is from the life of Srinivasa Ramanujan, the great Indian born mathematical genius. Hardy took him to Cambridge, and every day in his notebook, Ramanujan went on writing theorem after theorem, law after law. Hardy asked him, "What is the proof, Ramanujan? You keep on writing all this?" Like a innocent baby, he says, "Sir, proof. I see that they are true." The Pratyaksha Anubhuti. Sri Ramakrishna said, "I see God. I see Kali." When you say, somebody say, "I see," then what proof do you need? The proof is that you see it, and that's it. And Ramanujan was asked to prove them. Then he said very shyly, "Sir, the problem is the moment I write down a particular theorem or a formula, my mind is rushes to the next one, next one, next one. I just don't have the time to prove any of them because there's no gap in my thought." Hundreds of theorems he wrote down in the notebook. Even now, after 100 years, this is a subject of research of scholars and great mathematicians in the world. Then Hardy asked him, "How do you write down? What is the source? Suddenly, from nowhere, how do you get these theorems?" Then, very shyly, Ramanujan said, "Sir, there's a secret which I can share with you. I have Namakkal goddess, my Kuladevi, a goddess, a Devi, whom I have been worshipping since childhood. She comes in a vision, in a dream or wherever, and then she dictates this formulae. Write down, Ramanujan." So I quickly write down in my notebook. So Hardy is supposed to have said, "This boy doubtlessly is a mathematical genius, but hopelessly spiritual, hopelessly religious." Out of such hopelessly religious and mystical and spiritual people have come the greatest discoveries in science and religion, in all that you find great which human beings have discovered. And therefore, Swami Vivekananda, for the first time, exposed to the Western world his great religious and mystical ideas. His Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga created a sensation. When he talked about the various chakras and the Kundalini power, etc., of the Raja Yoga, so many anatomists and doctors became tremendously interested. And people like William James were so curious to know what is beyond this. He wrote a book, Varieties of Religious Experience. And the entire Western world was shaken to its foundations by even knowing just the tip of the iceberg of the extraordinary discoveries and inventions that our great rishis and sages and munis realized through their experience, documented, and handed down to us. He exposed them and showed them the tremendous power of religious and mystical consciousness, which Einstein says is the noblest mainspring of all scientific research. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Swamiji. It was a wonderful exposition. You gave the overview of the path of the knowledge from our philosophical wisdom, and hopelessly religious people are more creative, and to get that the creativity to unravel, right? So you mentioned, okay, we have to go beyond mind. If you can really explain that, what does it mean, okay, from the spiritual perspective, that what does it mean to go beyond mind? If you can, I think some explanation, it will be helpful for the audience.
See, the human mind has unique capacity to transcend itself. It is just like, can you stand on your own shoulders? It's a very stupid question, you may say, but it is possible for the human mind to transcend itself, which means the human mind has the capacity for transcendence as well as immanence. Therefore, the highest reality called Brahman in Vedanta, in the ancient Indian spiritual wisdom, Sanatana Dharma, Hindu Dharma, has been called both transcendent and immanent. Transcendent meaning it goes beyond space, time, and causation. And immanent meaning it is in space, time, and causation, present everywhere as everything, at the same time not compromising with, not giving up its transcendental dimension. Don't ask how is it possible, because there is no how or why with regard to something which cannot be brought into the network of questioning. If you want more mathematical scientific explanation, you can go for the discussion in Roger Penrose's book, The uh, Emperor's New Mind, the first book he wrote. The question was raised in that book whether the human mind thinks algorithmically. He is arguing against artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence says the human mind also thinks through an algorithm. And if you can constantly train the mind in that algorithm, train any object in that algorithm, a robot, then the robot will also function in the same way as a human being. Now the question is it true that the human mind is thinking algorithmically at all? Finally, they found out the mathematical logic, which was very carefully built up with Whitehead and Russell and so on, was completely smashed to smithereens by a scientist called Gödel, who came up with what is known as the Gödel's theorem. Also, Gödel's theorem is also pronounced that way, where he said consistency and completeness questions are very profound. A theory which appears to be consistent is not complete, and a theory which claims to be complete is not consistent. That means there is an internal inconsistency built up within the complete system from the point of mathematical logic. And if you try to crack that, you have to compromise with either completeness or consistency. To put it simply, Gödel proved that there are certain true statements within the system of mathematical logic which are neither provable nor not provable within the system. God, Brahman, Supreme Reality, they are true statements because they have been seen, realized by people, experimented by thousands of people over millennia upon millennia. But you cannot prove it, I cannot disprove it. People come and say, can you prove God? Then I say, can you disprove him? You can't disprove him, I can't prove him, let us be friends. So there are certain things which cannot be proved, because the moment you prove it, you have to come to the logical mind, and the logical mind cannot catch it. Sri Ramakrishna has wonderful small songs in his gospel. Who will know who is Kali? It is beyond the mind and the intellect. Now the question is, how is it that which is beyond the mind can be understood or even seen, realized? The answer which is given is that there are two kinds of knowing. One is know something as an object. The other is know something by becoming it. A simple question which I always ask the students, can you prove this? How do you know? Do you have a pair of eyes? Do you have a face? Yeah, of course. How do you know? I see it in the mirror. Oh, that's only a reflection. Have you seen your eyes? You have not seen your eyes because the eyes are the things which see. So the question is raised in the Upanishad, how can you see the seer? How can you know the knower? How can you see the seer? How can you hear the hearer? So how do you know then that your eyes exist? Because you are the eyes. You know something by becoming it rather than know something by knowing it as an object. Sri Ramakrishna gives a very simple example. A salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. Salt and all want to know what is the depth of the ocean. The moment it entered the ocean, what happened? It melted away completely. Now the question, did the salt and all know the ocean or did not know the ocean? What will be your answer? The answer is yes and no. It did not know the ocean because it melted away. It did not know the ocean as an object, but it knew the ocean because it became the ocean. So the knowledge which you gain through the senses, through the mind, through the logic, is the knowledge of something which you see as an object. Outside, I am the subject, I know that as an object. And the process of knowing is called knowledge. In technical language in Sanskrit, Vedanta is called Gyeya, is the object which is known. Gyata is a subject which is the knower. And the process by which it is known is called knowledge. Jnana. Jnana, Gyata, and Gyeya. Now, if all the three of them coalesce into one, who is the knower and who is the known? There is only one infinite consciousness, and infinity cannot be known by anybody because if that person knows it, he is apart from the infinite. He is different from the infinite, then the infinite becomes finite. And infinity cannot be two because the two infinities, as Vivekananda pointed out, each one of them will try to limit the other, both of them become finite. So infinity means it is one. And why should it be infinite? Because it is changeless. That which is changing is within space, time, and causation. Because change takes place. From this place, I go to that place, change. From yesterday, I moved to today, time. And yesterday is the cause and today is the effect. So anything which is unchanging has to be beyond space, time, and causation. Anything which is unchanging has to be infinite. And that which is infinite has to be one. If it is one, it has to be me. Why? If I am apart from the infinite, then infinite will become two. So I am that infinite. Tat Tvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi. This is a logical conclusion to which Vedanta drives you if you are serious, unbiased, and leaves you to realize it because you are that infinite consciousness. Thank you.
So, I mean, the adding to this is when Vedanta tells that we are that infinite consciousness, then why is that it is not been consciously experienced by everyone?
Once again, the why is a problem.
Okay.
The moment you bring the idea of why and how, you are in the realm of time, space, and causation. What is why? You're asking for the cause. What is causation? Time. Because what happened yesterday is the cause, what happens today is the effect. There cannot be any causality without sequence of timing. Why did you not come yesterday? Oh, I was having a cold and fever. Why? I drenched in the rain the day before. Oh, be careful. Why did you not come today? I am going to drench in the rain tomorrow, so I did not come. It makes no sense. That which is the cause is yesterday, so today is the effect. So the moment you ask for why, you are in the realm of causation, time and space. And you are asking about something which is beyond time and space and causation, and asking the question of why, these two are inconsistent. And therefore, the question of why, how, cannot be raised with regard to the Supreme Flow. You realize that every day, Vedanta says, in deep sleep.
Yeah.
You are not aware of it. That's it. Deep sleep is a peculiar phenomenon, and Ravindra knows he has been studying deep sleep from the point of neuroscience, neurophysiological, neuroscientific perspectives. What kind of consciousness is there in deep sleep? You do not have a subject-object consciousness at all because you don't realize anything, which means you have driven to the conclusion that there is a subject-objectless consciousness in which consciousness does not divide itself into a subject and an object. In dream, consciousness itself divides itself into subject and an object. I see a dream, I see this webinar happening in dream. So consciousness itself divides into subject and an object. When you go to deep sleep, a profound dreamless sleep, there is no subject, there is no object. And therefore there cannot be any knowledge. But I have a feeling that I have knowledge. I slept well. I was so happy. So how do you have these feelings of happiness and sleeping well and I did not knowing anything? You have the knowledge of the ignorance of not knowing. So you come back and then function. That means there is a level of consciousness in which the subject object, both of them coalesce into one. The subject objectless consciousness is that supreme consciousness, not the consciousness which says, I am conscious of that. The subject is conscious of the object, is what we normally know. The Westerners call it the hard problem and the soft problem and all that. We knew long ago consciousness is something which transcends time, space, and causation, in which the knower, the known, and the process of knowledge, jnata, gyeya, and jnana coalesce and become one. There is one homogeneous vijnana ghana eka rasa. There is Shankara's statement. Vijnana becomes condensed, as it were, a mass of consciousness in which the subject, object, and the process of knowing, the triad, is completely blasted and you vanish into that supreme state. Buddha called it Shunya, Shankara calls it Purna. And Shunya and Purna can be mathematically proven to be the same. Thank you.
Yeah, Maharaj. So, you raise a very pertinent point on hard problem and soft problem of consciousness, where today people are raising. But what is your comment on probably this hard problem and soft problem of consciousness has raised because of the confusion that is there, the Western psychology or the Western philosophy probably about the between the mind and consciousness. Are they really equating mind and consciousness and bring about this hard problem of consciousness, or or to this hard problem is there as an insight from Indian philosophy thought that it can throw some light?
Their problem is consciousness means being conscious of something. I am conscious of this table. I am conscious of this webinar. I am conscious of this nature. I am conscious of this world. I, a subject, I am conscious of an object. The moment you talk about consciousness, it is automatically understood by such people that you have to have consciousness of something. If there's only consciousness without an object of which it is conscious, then how can consciousness exist? The Indian wisdom, the Vedantic wisdom says, it is not that consciousness exists, consciousness is existence. It is not that consciousness knows, it is knowledge. It is not that consciousness is blissful, it is bliss. It is Sat Chit Ananda Swarupa. To know that I exist, I do not need any other proof. How do I know I exist? Ask anybody, are you here? Yeah, I'm here. How do you know? You don't produce a videograph or a photograph of yourself sitting there and say, see, this photograph, I am here. That I am is a consciousness which does not require any external proof of knowing yourself. That I exist is a feeling which is not known to you as I being conscious of myself. Suppose you argue, you have to have a consciousness to be able to know anything. That's the problem of hard problem. People say that there can't be any consciousness unless you are conscious of something. Then Vedanta asks them, Are you conscious of your existence? Yes, I am here. How do you know? I know I exist because I exist. So the knowledge, consciousness of my existence does not come to me as I being an object, I knowing it. Suppose you argue that I know myself as an object, otherwise I will not be able to conscious of myself. Then suppose you say you are an object, then who is the subject? I. Who is the object? I. How can the I be both subject and object? So since I can't be subject and object at the same time, you are forced to conclude that there is a level of consciousness in which the subject object both of them coalesce into one and vanish, and the subject objectless awareness which is called the consciousness of your own existence. So the awareness of your own existence automatically comes to you without you are being consciously trying to be aware of yourself. I just exist, that's it. So all the other things, how do they exist? How do you explain the existence of other things? The moon exists, the sun exists, the table exists, the building exists. So Vedanta says, since exists is common, take exists out of the bracket. Ax plus bx plus cx plus up to zx, x multiplied by a plus b plus c, the school arithmetic which we study, algebra. So take existence outside, within bracket, you put the moon, the sun, the table, the building, etc., and close the bracket. So you can interpret by this saying, there is one supreme existence, and all the various objects that you talk about are only superimposed upon this object. If you remove all these objects, still existence will be there. Which is exactly what Einstein said. If you remove all matter, don't think everything will vanish. So if all matter goes away, if existence, only existence with pure existence will remain. What is pure existence? Is there impure existence? The word has to be used because there is a level of consciousness that will just exist. In deep sleep experience, for example, you have the feeling of just existing. I exist. How do you know I exist? I exist because I know, I feel I exist. Is it a feeling of the mind? No. I don't know whether it's a feeling of the mind or consciousness. I don't know. Don't ask me too many questions. I exist, I know. So it is not knowing because you are seeing yourself existing, but knowing because I exist. That's it. So existence, in the ocean of existence, all the objects, as it were, are floating like that. And this existence has to be awareness, consciousness. Because existence alone can be realized without an external agency trying to certify to its existence. For example, Ramana Maharshi would say, how do you know that the world exists? The world doesn't come and tell you I exist. But you say the world exists. This is one problem in physics. Physics is asking what is matter. Physics is the science of matter. Physics does not know what is matter. There is no definition of matter in physics. Biology talks about life. Biology does not have a definition of life. And people beyond them talk about consciousness. They do not know what is consciousness. But we know what it is. Suppose you ask, what is time? Can you tell me what is time? Oh, I don't know what is time, but I know that the clock says 9:05. You know it, but you can't really say what it is because you are it. The world does not come and tell you I exist. I'll give you a simple example. Heavily crowded at Belur Mutt, some function is going on, continuously announcement is going on, so and so is missing, and one small kid was coming with his mother and suddenly slipped away somewhere. And his crying, mother is crying, whatever, where did you go? Where did you go? He's crying, hey Sham, where did you go? Sham is his mom, I'm here. I said, you fellow, why did you slip away? Act 1, Scene 1. Act 1, Scene 2, I am just rushing to the office. An important document is necessary for presentation of the meeting today. I am not able to locate it. Then I cried to everybody and shouted at my wife and children, where, what is it? Then I opened the drawer and find it is there. The document did not say, I am here, why are you shouting? Pick me up. In the first Act 1, Scene 1, the boy said, I am here. In the Act 1, Scene 2, the document and the piece of paper did not tell me I exist. Although it is just there. What is the difference? The difference is consciousness does not require anything else to certify to its existence. It announces itself. So this is called self-revelation, Swayam Prakasha. It just reveals itself. Everything else apart from consciousness requires consciousness to reveal it. Consciousness does not require anything else apart from it to reveal itself. It is self-revealing. So the self-awareness is called bliss or ananda. You are just sitting there without thinking anything and you feel great joy. What is the source of that joy? Yourself. So awareness of one's own existence is ananda. So Vedanta says you are sat and this existence is chit because it's self-revealing and awareness chit of the sat is ananda. So a real swarupa is sat chit ananda swarupa and that is infinite because it is unchanging. If it is infinite, it has to be one. If it is one, it has to be me and I am that infinite consciousness. Period, full stop, QED. Proven. It's so logical, so simple.
Yes, Swamiji. So, Swamiji has given a wonderful insight to the Indian philosophical wisdom of trying to understand as the consciousness is the basic substratum of the whole universe and also as an individual being. And I was mentioning in my introductory thing that the sense of I, how it is generated, is not been uh, answered to any modern theories of consciousness, but this aspect of uh, I am consciousness probably will give some insight even to understand the modern theories of consciousness also. So I would like to thank Swamiji for his wonderful exposition on trying to on consciousness from the Vedantic perspective. So thank you, Swamiji. Thank you very much. I now would like to introduce our second speaker, uh, Dr. Indranil Basure. Dr. Indranil Basure, who is a medical professional, a highly accomplished cardiologist of our times, and has been not only as a cardiologist, but he's also a very regular, ardent, serious Kriya Yoga meditator who has been initiated in this Kriya Yoga tradition. And he's also a founder chairman of American Academy of Yoga and Meditation. He has a wonderful accomplishments as a cardiologist, where with a lot of publications. And most important aspect is Dr. Ray has been pioneering in integrating yoga and lifestyle in the general health, but more specifically with the cardiac health, and also trying to bring this into the modern medical education. So he has been awarded with many prestigious honors, and he is also a visiting professor of cardiology and the head of integrative cardiology in All India Institute of Medical Sciences at Rishikesh, and is also a professor of public health in University of Memphis. And most important is that shortly, he's the chief editor of the world's most say highly or the first reference book on the principles and practice of yoga in cardiovascular these diseases. And and also probably he's a technocrat, probably has developed several tools to treat the irregularities or irregular beats in the heart, just maybe like tachycardia or atrial fibrillation. And also he he organized the first world conference on the role of meditation and the cardiovascular disease in Ames, Rishikesh. So he's a passionate physician, highly trained person who can integrate both the Indian uh, wisdom with the medical science and also into the uh, medical education. So I welcome now Dr. Ray to share his views. Dr.
Thank you very much. Can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see my screen? Hello? Can you guys see my screen? Hello? Yeah.
We can see Dr. Ray.
You can or you cannot?
We can. It's visible.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Please put
So
the,
I'm making it full. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. I really appreciate that. I am I In this today's talk, I'm going to talk about the scientific understanding and the biological understanding of consciousness, and I'm then going to talk about how the Swami Vivekananda's interjection of Advaita philosophy in the West has actually changed what science or biology believes. I'm also going to talk a little bit about physics, quantum physics, to make an understanding as to where the consciousness comes from, especially given the fact that present understanding of consciousness needs a lot of physics. It's both a physical as well as a biological phenomena, possibly. I like to take the blessings of Swami Vivekananda, on whose anniversary we are doing this, and my guru lineage, starting from Mahavatar Babaji and my guru Hariharananda Giriji. I like to take the blessings of Swami Atma Priyanandaji. It's always a challenge to talk after him, but I'll take his blessings. That hope I can get my ideas across. So today we are going to talk about something that is completely different, that has been there in Hindu philosophy for over 10,000 years. But modern science has sort of crawled into this understanding in the last 1 century. As Ye said, as Vivekananda had said, he said there is unity of matter, which is called Akasha. There's unity of force, which is called Prana. And both of them can be melded into one. And he said this almost 10, 15 years before. But he clearly says the modern science is mute here. It has not yet found its way out. He says this because, as Swami Atmapriyananda said, this was done decades before E is equal to mc square came up. Einstein came up with the concept E is equal to mc square. But as the Swamiji alluded, he actually, after sitting in meditation near Almora, he came out with something that is unbelievable. He said that both micro world and the macro world is built on the same plan. Both the micro world and the macro world is with the built plan. This is unbelievable. This is complete nonsense based on the science of that time, because at that time there was the end point of matter was atom, and atom was surrounded by electrons, just like how Earth goes around the sun, or the planets goes around the sun. That was the concept. Niels Bohr first came out, and Max Planck first came out with basic concepts of quantum physics in 1900, but that was very preliminary. So these concepts of Advaita, of what micro and macro world is, has been there in Indian philosophy for ages. So let's find out how science has slowly moved on from its concepts to what we have and what we know today. So as I said, E is equal to mc square, or everything in the universe is energy, came across in 1905, and this is this is like almost 9 years after Vivekananda said it. And somebody called Olinto Di Preto, not many of you may have heard his name. He is actually credited with saying the same. He is a geophysicist from Italy in 2 years before Christ, about 2 years before Einstein, though Einstein got fame for this. So this core concept that the whole universe is one, and there is nothing two in this, there cannot be two set of laws, was core of Hindu philosophy or Advaita, that for the first time was brought into Western science thanks to Swami Vivekananda. And as we know, Swami Vivekananda was known to the biggest names during that time, whether it is Lord Kelvin or Tesla, biggest names at them, and they were strongly influenced by him. Actually, one more quote, that's what Vivekananda said: the whole universe is one. There is only one self in the universe, only one existence. And that one existence, when it passes through the forms of time, space, and causation, is called by different names: buddhi, fine matter, gross matter, mental or physical form. Everything in this universe is one, appearing in various forms. When a little part of it comes, as it were, into this network of time, space, and causation, it takes forms. Take off the network, and it is all one. What an understanding! This is the exact understanding of modern day quantum physics, or as string theory, as Dr. Admapriyanandaji spoke about. But we'll go into that. So, what was the problem with the Einsteinian theory? Why was Einstein wrong? The problem with Einsteinian theory was Einstein said that the whole universe has energy, and energy, matter is only energy, but vibrating at such a low level that we can see it as matter. But in essence, he did not believe the basic understanding of Advaita, that the whole universe is one. So he said, we need a third element like sound or light to communicate with each other. So the basic communication between, say, one part of the universe to the other part of the universe has to be through a third element, which is not what Advaita says. Advaita says everything is one. But then came quantum physics, and then came something called as quantum entanglement. Let's play this video and we'll talk more.
Quantum mechanics shows us that reality is merely an illusion. It has been more than 100 years since we started decoding the universe at the tiniest scale. Over the years, we have discovered several intriguing phenomena in quantum physics, but the most interesting is quantum entanglement. This is such a mind-boggling reality that even Albert Einstein doubted its existence. He called it spooky action at a distance. To get an idea of how quantum entanglement works, consider this simple example. Suppose you have a pair of gloves, and you place two of them in two different boxes. After that, you shuffle the boxes and ask your friend to open one of the boxes. If he opens the box and finds a right-handed glove, then without opening the second box, you know that it contains a left-handed glove. This will remain true even if you take the second box to the moon or anywhere in the universe. That's because the two gloves were entangled entities and had a connection between them. One was right-handed and the other was left-handed. But things become spooky when you try to apply this principle to particles in the quantum realm. Particles have an intrinsic property called spin. Before you measure it, it can be in any direction. To measure the spin, first you need to specify the direction in which you wish to measure it. If you want to measure it horizontally, Then the two possible outcomes will be left-handed or right-handed. If you wish to measure it vertically, then the two outcomes would be either up or down. Consider the spin of two particles. As mentioned earlier, before measurement it can point in any direction. Let's now measure the spin of one particle along the horizontal direction. Then the measured spin will be either right or left, each having a 50% chance. Even if you select the second particle for measurement, you will get the same results, 50% right and 50% left. However, if the particles are entangled just like the gloves, see what happens. If you measured the spin of the first particle and found it right, then the outcome of the second particle will be 100% left. So, the information of measurement got to the second particle the moment the first measurement was made. And here's the spooky thing. This information is transmitted instantaneously. If you make the measurement in one part of the universe, the quantum information can be sent to the entangled particle instantaneously, even in the opposite part of the cosmos. Remember, traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second, light is the fastest thing in the universe. But quantum entanglement is independent of it. So far, it was believed that quantum entanglement is purely a quantum phenomenon. However, scientists have recently observed this spooky action on a macroscopic scale.
It's very interesting that while initially, despite coming out with the understanding that everything in the world is an energy, but science was still elusive because science still felt, or medicine, people as big as Einstein still felt that though everything is one, there still needs a third party. You don't need a third party when everything is one. They have their own mechanism of communication. Now, how it happens, we don't know. And that's why we have, as Advaita ji said, we have what is called the elusive theory of everything. This is a beautiful article written by Stephen Hawking on theory of everything. We still don't have the answer. But let's go and try to understand what we mean biologically. What does the science feel about it biologically? And then go back to Advaita Vedanta to have a better understanding to see if that makes more sense than what we know today scientifically. So Francis Crick, one of the scientists who got Nobel Prize for discovering the DNA, he wrote in his famous book, The Astonishing Hypothesis, that your sorrows, your joys, your memories, your ambition, everything depends on interaction of neurons or nerve cells and their associated molecule. So consciousness is nothing but a bundle of nerves firing. If that's true, then we should have a place inside the brain that causes consciousness. And some of the leading people who talk about brain being involved in consciousness, including Christopher Koch, have termed the term neuronal correlates of consciousness. So what in the brain is causing consciousness? Now, you know that there is a disease called epilepsy where people have violent shaky movements of the head, legs, they hurt themselves, they have multiple fractures. So this is treated by medicine. But in cases where medicine fails to treat, you have to go for surgical correction. So what do? You cut off piece of the brain. So there are tens of people who had their cerebellum cut off. Was their consciousness less? No. They were as consciousness that you are, or as consciousness that I am. So then they said, why don't we cut the super highway connecting the two sides of the brain? So there is a superhighway called the corpus callosum that has got over 200 million neurons connecting the two brain. So that was cut off. There are hundreds of people who have the corpus callosum cut out due to intractable epilepsy. Are they anyway less conscious or have they become unconscious? They're neither unconscious nor they're less conscious. They're as conscious as you and me. And similarly, they went on cutting the frontal lobe. There are some diseases where the frontal lobe had to be cut, especially in cases of frontal tumors like glioma, meningioma. Unfortunately, they remain. There are certain activities they can do slower. Like if you cut off the cerebellum, if you ask the person to walk on a straight line, he'll falter. But his consciousness is not changed. His consciousness is same as you and me. So obviously, and I'm going to prove through this work, through my talk today, that consciousness lies outside the human body. And let's try to understand that a little more. Before we go, let's talk about this beautiful lecture that Swami Vivekananda gave in London, where he explains that the infinite or the absolute is there, and then we have the universe. The universe, he says, lies in the fringes of this absolute, which is caused by time, space, and causation. So through the glass of time, space, and causation, we get to see the universe. But once we are beyond all these three, there is absolute. So in the absolute, there is no time, no space, no causations. They are all part and parcel of this finite universe. But once you go to the infinite, none of them exist. Now, does that make any meaning? Let's understand that a little better. Swami Aurobindo similarly says, all is consciousness at various levels of its own manifestation. This universe is a gradation of planes of consciousness. Now, it is obviously true that we have this biological, neurobiological concept of consciousness for almost, 60, 70 years. And there are other physicians and scientists who have added to that. For example, Roger Penrose, as as Advaita ji said, he and Stuart Hameroff thought that the small tubules in the brain is responsible for consciousness, but they are obviously proved wrong. Similarly, the 25 years dialogue between David Bohm and Krishnamurti came out with other concepts of consciousness. Quite a few of them has not been, they are also reductionists, but less reductionist than what Christopher Koch or Francis Crick is saying. So I have this beautiful quote from Cicero, which is almost in 444 BC, which he says, why do you insist the universe is not a conscious intelligence when it gives birth to conscious intelligence? Very interesting and very rational quote. So let me make you understand on the scientific basis where we are faltering and why we are faltering. And this is me not as a doctor, not as a yogi, but as a doctor, a physician, and a scientist. You see, far less than 1/1,000,000,000 of 1% of the cosmos lies within the web of our telescopes. And I'm talking about the Hubble telescope, which is a radio telescope. Now we have the James Webb telescope coming up. Maybe we'll get a little more view, but still, even it is just a small fraction of the actual cosmos, because the majority of everything is composed of unknown entities, dark matter, dark energies. So a sample size is very, very minuscule. Even the word minuscule is too big, even smaller than that. Now, there's increasing evidence that the universe may be spatially infinite. That would make it infinite in its inventory as well. In which case, everything that lies within the view is actually 0% of the whole universe, as any fraction of infinity is nothing. So, basically our knowledge till now is as next to zero about the actual universe. The point is, to be honest, our data is currently too negligible to allow a valid generalization. This is a quote by Edwin Laszlo. Let me give you a simpler example. I have a very good medicine for COVID-19, and I call it IBR's medicine, internal Basure's medicine. I give it to one person, and it looks like it works. I'm not very sure, but it looks like it works. His fever went down. It could be because his fever went down by itself. So I take 100 people, but I just give it to one person. If you're the rest 99, will you take that medicine? Absolutely no. Because there is no proof that the medicine works. There's no proof that the medicine is not harmful. And there's no proof that it actually cured COVID. The guy who had COVID might have got cured by itself. Omicron is a much weaker form of COVID, so it got cured by itself. So in a universe where our knowledge is so minimal, trying to create a theory and saying that this is science doesn't make sense. And that's why you heard those quotes that Swami Atmapriyananda gave by one of the kings of science, Einstein, where he is so humble and he says where we are coming from. Let's go a little off and talk a little bit about the Upanishadic interpretation of it. So basically, we as human beings have this flux of mood, emotion, mental states, which may be, as Francis Crick says, is determined by the neurons, by play of neurons. You have more serotonin in your brain, you are happy. You have more dopamine in your brain, you are sad. But that doesn't mean the eternal timelessness that exists beyond that is also created by the brain. And we'll see it is not. So actually, as Vivekananda had given a beautiful example of what is happening with our brain and this universe, is a brain is like a pond which has got extremely clear water. You can see the floor of the pond. But a child is sitting at the corner of the pond and continuously throwing stones. So there's waves and ripples everywhere, and you cannot show. So you cannot see the floor of the pond. That does not mean that the floor is non-existence. Once you stop those ripples, you can see the floor, you can see the infinite. Similarly, our brain, as you know, has waves. And I'm literally speaking. If I take a EEG and put it inside my brain, I'll find very fast waves called alpha waves. And these alpha waves, I'll find beta waves. Beta waves looks very fast. It will be looking like as if your brain is extremely working. But it's actually paradoxical. Faster the wave you have, slower the brain is working. Your brain actually is not working. Those are beta waves. Now I am talking with you, so I need area 1819, which is the back of my brain, to see my computer. Now, why am I talking with you to the computer? There's nobody in my room other than this computer. So who am I talking to? Am I crazy? So this area 1819 has to talk with the area above my ears, called area 4142, and say, hey, what are you doing? Are you crazy? So area 4142 gives back signals to the back of my brain and says, no, my friend, we are talking in a laptop. This is through StreamYard or Zoom or WebEx is going to be seen by hundreds, thousands of people all over the world. So I now get a meaning that despite me sitting in a room alone and talking, I can actually get my ideas across to everybody. So if I put a small electrode in my area 1819 and in my area 4142, I will find there is no more beta waves, but there are very slower waves called the alpha waves. So whenever your brain concentrates, you go to alpha waves. Now in yoga, they teach you can have something called supraconscious glance. You raise your eyes and you look towards the so-called third eye. What happens then? You'll see your brain creates alpha waves. So that's one of the techniques we use or we teach people to go to meditation, to calm your mind. So that creates alpha waves. But slowly we will see in this talk that there are people who can create even slower waves like gamma waves, delta waves, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But I just wanted to give you an idea that what Upanishad is saying, we are far from proving it. But modern science has gone to a large extent to say that the basic concept seems exactly similar. Let's go forward now. We know the four states of consciousness from Mandukya Upanishad. The first quarter, I'm not going to go into the details, but giving you just a basic understanding for the sake of our talk. The first quarter is where we are in a waking state. So in the waking state, the gross material objects are enjoyed. So that's the state possibly where you have serotonin, dopamine playing their game. You have chemistry, you are falling in love. They are all electrical and chemical reaction within the brain. The second quarter is the dream state where you are responsible for subtle internal objects. The third quarter state of deep dreamless sleep. Priyanandaji talked a little bit about that. But you have to remember, even in the deep dreamless sleep, you do not have two separate existences. But a dreamless sleep is not a state when your brain is sleeping. In fact, as all of you know, every one of you that grew from the mother's womb to an adult now or till you die, the growth is because of growth hormone. And growth hormone is released by the pituitary during sleep only. So when you're exactly sleeping, your brain is actually not sleeping, your brain is awake. That's why it is said, in fact, there's been multiple studies where people were given to sleep for 8 hours and they were taught and they were given to meditate for 4 hours. At the end of 8 hours sleep, And at the end of 20 minutes of meditation, they had better perception. They could do complex mathematical things and complex Sudoku more than somebody sleeping for 8 hours. What does that show? That shows that though that sleep is an instrument where brain shuts off some of its function to do things that brain needs to do which it cannot do when it keep awake, and has to deal with your emotions, your greed, your thoughts, your what you want to do. So it needs to shut those off to do its basic function. Let's go a little forward and we'll talk about something called Turiya. I'll not talk a lot about it, but that is the state where all this day-to-day brain function that we need as a human being stop existing. And that is the state where, as possibly which Vivekananda, when Vivekananda talks about macrocosm and microcosm, those truths of the universe are reached when you reach that state. Now, I'll just give you an example, and it's very important to understand this. We don't know what Turiya is. I have never experienced it. Some sadhus who have, those who have, they possibly don't even come out in the open. But the fact is that meditation takes you to that level of existence. How do we know that? Is it scientific, what Upanishad is saying? So let me give you an example. Richard Davidson has done CT MRIs on a bunch of meditators, including Dalai Lama and a whole group of meditators who have meditated for 20, 30, 40, even 60,000 hours. What did he find? He found their brain was completely changed. Their brain was extremely powerful. Their brain started growing. Instead of having dementia, they never had dementia. After 30 years of age, every day you lose 200, 300 of your brain cells. By the time you're 80, 90, your whole brain becomes like a monkey's brain, small. What do I mean by that? So from your 10 years of age, every 10 years, if I do CT scan of your brain, by the time you're 60, 70, 80, you'll find this huge brain that you have will become so small, almost like a monkey's brain. And that's why at the age of 80, there are 35% of the population in the Western world live in nursing homes because they don't know who they are. They know who their son is. They don't even know their name. So they're in severe dementia. But practice of meditation completely changes this. You can grow your brain. You can decrease your aging. In fact, there's a new concept called biological and chronological aging. So chronologically, you may be 90 years old. Biologically, you're only 70 years old. That's why you find 90 years old sadhus in Himalayas walking up faster than you and me, who are just 50 years old. So the physical body also decreases in aging. So imagine if somebody with 50, 60, 70,000 hours of meditation can do this, what is the brain that somebody like Ramakrishna or Vivekananda could have achieved, who could have gone into samadhi in seconds? We don't know. But we can imagine if I have passed class 7 and 8, or I have passed MSc now, I know what is taught in class 7. So we have just reached class 7. If in class 7, this is what it could be achieved, imagine what these great masters would have achieved. So going back into consciousness, I want to bring out some of the important things that is very important to understand. And one of this is that, as I talked about the different waves, most of the meditators have been found to have something called gamma, which is an extremely slow waves. But these waves are found in meditators even when they are normal, not when they're only meditating. What does that mean? That means meditation is making permanent changes in your brain. What else does that mean? These studies have shown that these people, as I said, their perception of reality changes. Exactly as Vivekananda was saying, when he got up from meditation, he wrote the note. In his note, he wrote that I found that the whole universe is one. Unfortunately, they have found matter, they have found energy, and after his death, they said matter and energy is one, but they have to find the third thing. The third thing is they are not two different things, they're only one. And today, for the last 50 years, that's what science has been grappling with the M theory, which is a part of string theory, and a bunch of other theories. String theory has not even been proved. Nobody has seen a string. Even gravity has not been proved. What is gravity? Has it come before consciousness? Has it come after consciousness? If gravity was not there, the macrocosm would not have been there. You wouldn't have found all the black holes, huge stars, planet, Earth, nothing would have been there. But at the same time, the macro world is totally different from the micro world, which is fuzziness. The whole universe is fuzziness. So what is our brain seeing? Our brain is an instrument that converts this fuzziness into a table, chair, people, world that you and I are seeing. So what we are seeing is being created by our brain. As Vivekananda said, it is the mind which is creating everything. So the creation, the truth out there, the reality out there, and we'll see, I'll show you, I'll prove you at the end. Not because I am saying it, but some of the top neuroscientists and consciousness experts are also saying that. What we are seeing is not reality. Reality is being created by us. And that's why, based on what Vivekananda said, the mind is creating. John Archibald Wheeler actually had once said, there is nothing called reality. Reality only exists because there's an observer. Because you and I are observing it, that's why reality is coming. So consciousness is coming because there's an observer. Consciousness is inherent in the creation. Consciousness is part of Advaita. Consciousness comes with the absolute. Our brain is an instrument created to understand that consciousness for your and my living. I create a consciousness for my living. You create a consciousness for your living. But it is now true that we have clinical evidence that consciousness persists outside the brain. So that kills all the neurobiologists who have been writing books after books, pages after pages, that brain creates consciousness. Why? Because this experiment in nature clearly shows that people in cardiac arrest who had no brain function, who had no heart function, could actually write down point to point what happened with their physical body when they were shocked. That thing is called a near-death experience because they were actually dead. Physiologically, based on modern medicine, based on modern neurology, based on modern cardiovascular science, they were nothing else but dead. Their heart was a straight line, their brain was a straight line, but they could say everything. What the surgeon was saying, what the cardiologist was saying, what the nurses were saying. We have patients who are dying every day, and we do resuscitation of these patients. And some of these patients come back and tell you exactly what happened when you know they were dead. They were not dead for a few seconds, so that you might say, oh, maybe you did a mistake. No, they were really not dead. They were dead for minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and then they recovered. And there is not 1, 2, 3 reports of this. There are many, there are books on this. And we don't know the phenomena, but we do know, thanks to the fight that all the neurobiologists who thinks consciousness comes from the brain, that wherever consciousness comes from, brain is just an instrument to interpret it. Consciousness doesn't come only from our brain. Now, everything in this universe is conscious, as Vivekananda said, when he exposed the idea of Advaita and conscious to the world. Even a tree is conscious. So you think, how can a tree be conscious? It's lying there. You go and cut it. You go and slash one of its branches. They will not feel pain. That's not true. In the 1970s, they did a landmark research, and this is the book. Please feel to read the book. This book has all scientific research. Not one is a fantasy or a spiritual or a religious nonsense talked by people. All of the research given here are by scientists. So giraffe, they eat the acacia leaf because they are large, big leaves. They love eating it. So when they start eating it, it pains the trees. So what does the tree do? It just sits because it has no consciousness. No. Read this book. See the experiments. The acacias then start releasing ethylene dioxide, which is a toxic chemical which changes the taste of the leaf. How did the scientists come to know? They found that these giraffes go and eat a set of acacias for a few days. And then they stop eating and they go to a different set of trees, even though the trees are still there. Why would I, if my food is with me here, why would I go to another set of trees 100 yards apart and start eating those instead of finishing what is already there? There's a whole forest in front of me. That is because these trees, and we don't know how they communicate, they release this toxic chemical so that the change in taste occurs in the leaves, forcing the giraffe to go far away and try those leaves till those plants, obviously the consciousness in plant is much slower. Their speed of sending information is much slower. But don't think they are dumb organisms. Every leaf that creates chlorophyll uses quantum physics. Every leaf. So that grass on which you walk and you think this stupid grass may be more intelligent than you and me. The problem is we haven't understood consciousness. We take everything at our level. A bird which goes 6,000 miles from Siberia to Africa during winter when it is minus 70 in Siberia uses quantum physics in its brain to as a GPS system to drive it to show the path over Earth to go from north to the south. Just a small bird. So imagine the power of the universe. So the problem is we take everything as our standard. So if something doesn't look like what we do, they are dumb, they don't have consciousness. And unfortunately, this is what science, especially biology, has been following. Thankfully, physics has changed in the last 70 to 100 years with phenomena like quantum entanglement. And there are a lot of other things which are even more weird. Like, can you deduce your future? Some experiments in quantum physics says yes, maybe the future is determined. But I'm not going to go into those controversies. But the point that I wanted to make here is very clear. So does that mean a rock is conscious? Obviously not. But take a carbon atom in the rock and take a carbon atom in your hand. What is the difference? Nothing. The carbon atom in your hand with its electron proton is looks as conscious as the carbon atom in that rock. One electron, as you saw quantum entanglement, one electron in your skin, you may not know, knows what another entangled electron in the sun is doing. One electron in this rock, which is obviously not as conscious as you think you and I are, knows what another one is in the sun doing. What do I mean by that? By that, do I mean that, am I stupid enough to mean that this rock is conscious? Absolutely not. What I mean is, at the basic level, there is consciousness. So the photons are also possibly conscious. That doesn't mean I'm saying that the photons are intelligent. Photons are have consciousness like you and me. Photons have emotion. Photons are sad because they are buzzing like electricity. I'm not saying that. There is some amount of consciousness which we still to find. And this is not me who is saying that. David Chalmers, one of the radical thinkers in the field of consciousness, who has some of his theories look like as if they've been picked up from Advaita. I don't know if he really picked it up or they're his own. Actually says that there is consciousness in everything. Every photon, electron has some amount of consciousness, which you still don't know, because they behave in a way which makes us believe they do have some amount of, I don't know if you should call it primitive or if you should call it inherent consciousness. So consciousness is part of this infinite creation. The consciousness we see is what we need. I need consciousness to stay as a human being. A snake needs consciousness to live a life of a snake. An alligator needs consciousness to reproduce, have a life of an alligator. That doesn't mean that the brain of the snake creates consciousness. It doesn't mean that your and my brain creates consciousness. Yes, your and my brain interprets consciousness. And when we go past the brain, as Advaita says, as Vivekananda says, when we cross that brain, when we cross those ripples, when we go to the next understanding of the brain in deep meditation, we understand, as Vivekananda said, the work of the universe, the work of the absolute. Even in human brain, take for example the area 1819 I talked about. Area 1819 has got more than 1 trillion neurons. So can you imagine the amount of energy it will be required for us to run our brain on a daily basis? We have enough evidence that that energy cannot be provided by the body. We do not have enough ATP. ATP is the coin or the currency for energy in the body to supply to the brain. So there's a large number of physicists and biologists who think brain uses quantum fuzziness. I don't want to go into details. There's something called superposition where one electron can be in multiple places. That's what something like that brain uses for memory. Brain uses for some of its emotion. Brain uses for its computing abilities. So, in other words, going back to what Swami Vivekananda said, it's your mental thought which is creating the world. If your thought is beautiful, it will be beautiful. If thought is ugly, it will be ugly. The whole world is in our minds. The mind is creating this reality. If that is what Advaita meant as virtual reality, I don't know. If that is what is meant by Maya, I don't know. But the fact is, what you see is not reality. What you see is the reality made by your brain. Now, let's go to this video and see what one of the prominent neurobiologists of
Our
today
conscious
says.
experiences of the world around us and of ourselves within it are kinds of controlled hallucinations that happen with, through, and because of our living bodies. Let me give you a couple of examples of all this. In the rubber hand illusion, a person's real hand is hidden from view, and that fake rubber hand is placed in front of them. Then both hands are simultaneously stroked with a paintbrush while the person stares at the fake hand. Now, for most people, after a while, this leads to the very uncanny sensation that the fake hand is, in fact, part of their body. And the idea is that the congruence between seeing touch and feeling touch on an object that looks like a hand and is roughly where a hand should be is enough evidence for the brain to make its best guess that the fake hand is, in fact, part of the body. Here's one more example, which shows just how quickly the brain can use new predictions to change what we consciously experience. Have a listen to this. Now listen to this.
I think Brexit is a really terrible idea.
Now listen to the first sound again. I'm just going to replay it. Yeah? So you can now hear words there. Once more for luck. Okay, so what's going on here is the remarkable thing is the sensory information coming into the brain hasn't changed at all. Instead of perception depending largely on signals coming into the brain from the outside world, it depends as much, if not more, on perceptual predictions flowing in the opposite direction. We don't just passively perceive the world, we actively generate it. So our experiences of the world around us and ourselves within it, well, they're kinds of controlled hallucinations that have been shaped over millions of years of evolution to keep us alive in worlds full of danger and opportunity. We predict ourselves into existence. Let me give you one more example of perception as this active constructive process. In this panoramic video, we've processed the footage using an algorithm based on Google's Deep Dream to simulate the effects of overly strong perceptual predictions, in this case to see dogs. The result looks very much like the kinds of hallucinations people might report in altered states or perhaps even in psychosis. Now think about this for a minute. If hallucination is a kind of uncontrolled perception, then perception right here and right now is also a kind of hallucination, but a controlled hallucination in which the brain's predictions are being reined in by sensory information from the world. In fact, we're all hallucinating all the time, including right now. It's just that when we agree about our hallucinations, we call that reality.
So excellent point makes it very clear that what we are actually seeing is hallucinations. But when we hallucinate in a controlled fashion, that's exactly what we do, because the reality is the quantum form, the singularity that Vivekananda talked about. But the reality we see is the created reality. So the brain doesn't create consciousness. Brain rather is an instrument that makes sense of this reality, actual reality that Advaita talks about, and creates the world that we see. I think I'll stop for that now, and I'll hand over to Dr. Nagendra for any questions.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you. Yeah. Shall I?
We are, Dr. Nagendraji, we are already short in time, so I think
we can
one or
have
two
one or
questions,
two.
maximum one or two questions,
Sure, sure. Right.
because the
Thank
program
you.
is already 2 hours.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll thank Dr. Ray for his wonderful exposition, giving the insights from biological science, neuroscience, and quantum physics, integrating and culminating that brain is a wonderful predictive. It has a very good predictive capacity, and probably that is an instrument through which the consciousness expresses itself, where probably the emerging evidences and the Vedantic ideas probably in due course of time they come on the same platform. So the few couple of things or the observations with the Dr. Ray's presentation when he said about the beta waves or the gamma waves that comes with the meditators, even when they are not meditating, probably is the wonderful signatures of the trait characteristics of a long-term meditators. And even we have also observed the trait characteristic of the long-term meditators is to retain the slow wave sleep, otherwise which it attenuates with aging. So when the meditators can retain the slow wave sleep even in their old age, right, that brings a lot of insight into phenomenological aspects, of meditators the experience. So with this, when which I want to integrate two questions into one, Dr. Ray, for you, or maybe all the three into one, probably. So you talked about the quantum fuzziness in the brain, that happen, but the emerging so many evidences, that is coming now, and also we know that this emotion plays a very important role, right? It can be for a healthy well-being, or it can be including for the cardiovascular conditions, and also for the day-to-day experience, and also for the in our pursuit towards the mystical experiences. So for this emotion, the heart brain interaction plays a very, very important role. So what is your thoughts on the quantum fuzziness that can happen even in the at the heart, and probably that interact with the brain can bring about these various grades of emotional experience?
Yeah, so I think that's a very excellent questions. So the problem is that we modern medicine is still at its infancy, trying to understand the heart-brain connections. Other than finding a few nerves that come from the frontal lobe to the heart that can actually cause what is known as sudden cardiac death. When those nerves get excited, the heart completely stops. That's called sudden cardiac death. We just don't know any other connection. But there is a big field of understanding that there is a quantum element both in the heart as well as the brain, and that quantum element, and I'll tell you why. Let me give you first the before I tell you what my thought process is after so many years of meditation and what the science is. So first let me give you the science that is known. So the science that is known is that now in the next 15 minutes I'm depressed for whatever reason. So what happens? There is release of a bunch of chemicals in my blood, like interleukin 6, TNF alpha. All this makes my heart goes fast. These will cause inflammation. They will lead me to have inflammation in my blood vessels, causing heart attack, causing stroke. And this happens with very minor things. Like, for example, I'm just worried whether my son will do good, say, in the next exam. Something very frivolous, which all of us do. Or I have a long trip to go, whether my car will be able to make that long trip. I have an old car. But all these so-called thoughts is physically transformed into releasing chemicals inside the body by the heart and other organs like the endocrine, the inner side of all the blood vessels are called the endothelium. Heart is also lined by endothelium. So the heart is not considered a single organ. The heart and all the blood vessels in our body is together considered a single organ because their mechanism of function is same. So there are some indication that when we are emotionally thinking of adverse things, there are physical changes and release of chemicals by the heart and these endothelium, which propels us to have heart attacks, strokes, and other things. Now the question is the amount of energy we have. As you know, anything in the body needs energy. I mean, I'm moving my hand, that needs energy. I need to create ATP. The ATP will be used by the muscle to move my hand. So my brain nerves also need energy. Even the thinking that I'm going to move my hand will need multiple thousand ATP molecules. It's completely clear now that these ATPs are not enough to create the brain that the simple man has in his daily life. Leave alone somebody who's a meditator. Forget about him. A normal man. So where is this energy coming from? The energy is coming from because we are using something called superposition. So the energy that is there in one position. What is superposition? Superposition means that an electron can be in Calcutta or it can be in Delhi. It can be in Washington. It can be in Los Angeles, in both the places. And until you are really finding out that it is an electron and where it is, you never know where it could be in both the places. So this quantum fuzziness is being used by the brain. So the ATP, just like what a plant does. How does a plant create chlorophyll? Using quantum physics. If you take a plant, if it takes the photon from the sun, takes it to the chlorophyll filling center, the factory which makes chlorophyll, that will require lot of time, lot of energy. The plant doesn't have time for that. Plant doesn't have energy for that. Where does the energy come? By quantum mechanics. So that electron, the photon, is the plant takes for granted the photon is present in both the places. It is there where it strikes as well as in the chlorophyll factory. Similarly, our brain possibly uses that superposition capability to do this work. The other thing is, for example, in biology, there's a concept that you need this much of solution to do this much. Like there's a hill. So to cross the hill and go to the other side, you have to walk up the hill. That needs energy. But if you're in a quantum superposition, you're both on this side of the hill as well as that side of the hill. So the energy requirement that is required by the hill is not required at all. Does that make sense? So now, how does heart and brain do that? We don't know. Is there a non-physical way of it doing it? Possibly yes, but we do not know. But what we do know is that there's only one nerve. The upper part of the heart is supported by vagal nerve. Vagal nerve is the parasympathetic nerve. And as you know, all yoga techniques, whether you start meditating or whether you do pranayama, every meditating technique, all the breathing technique increases parasympathetic drive and decreases sympathetic drive. So does that means there is some sort of consonance you achieve when you practice pranayama? We don't know. But that's what rishis have done for thousands of years. So there could be a connect where heart itself as a quantum organ and brain itself as a quantum organ works. Like, for example, the gut. Gut now we know has more than 1 million neurons. Gut is an independent A. So we do not know about the heart. And there is enough evidence that abnormality in the heart's nerves can cause something called arrhythmias like atrial fibrillation. So does heart have a brain of its own? It's quite possible. Maybe in the next 50 years we'll decipher it. I hope that explains your question. It is not a very simple answer, but that I think is one way by which we can try to explain, and that's one of the ways where science is going ahead, trying to find out if what are the other means other than the physical connection by nerves from the brain to the heart to do these things. Hello. Hello.
Hello,
Ravindranji, can you hear me?
am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you're audible.
So your voice is breaking. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're clearly audible. Go ahead, Ravindraji. Go ahead. Please go ahead. Hello, go ahead.
So thank you, Dr. Ray, for the yeah. So you told that any yoga or the pranayama practices, it increases the vagal tone, and probably the polyvagal theory is one of the most prominent theory, okay, that talks about the interaction between mind and brain, and how the different qualities of the mind also uh, can be cultivated by enhancing the vagal uh, tone. So probably from the biological sense, that is the vagabond nerve is probably the link, from the brain, heart, and also probably to the gut, and where you have that unison. So now
No,
we have come in the state that we
no,
cannot isolate the brain completely.
no, Ravindraji, I no, I said, yeah, vagal nerve is a relation, but I don't think Vegas is the only thing. There can be other non-local
Yeah,
connections, just like de Broglie came out with non-local connections in the universe. So there may be non-local connection also. Remember, in Hindu philosophy, this physical body is ensheathed by multiple other bodies. So there may be non-local connection in the quantum level between the heart and the brain and the gut, which you do not know. Vagal nerve is just
yes,
the, like, I think vagus nerve is as what Ramakrishna said, that I wanted to take a bath in the ocean, but I just reached the beach. So vagal nerve is just that beach. It is the physical body has the vagus nerve, but there may be other non-local means which we need to find out by research. That's what I meant.
yeah. Okay, so with these, I'm very sure that this webinar was a wonderful feast. Hearing Swami Atma Priyanji Maharaj giving is a wonderful exposition from the Indian philosophical point of view about the consciousness, and at the different levels, okay, of the acquiring the knowledge. And Dr. Ray has also gave his views on integrating the biology, physiology, okay, and the quantum physics. At the end of the day, we came to know that the brain is not the ultimate of that everything. Even I'm from the Neuroscience Institute, but humbly I accept that yes, the brain is not the ultimate of whatever the I mean the consciousness or the mind that that we are talking about. It's a very very limited concept of consciousness that actually we talk about over here. But because it is brain is more predictive in nature, so we tend to reduce its consciousness, okay, to the brain. But I'm very sure that some of the musings now that is emerging from the different field of the modern science, I'm very sure in decades to come, the both the Vedantic ideas and the various field of science, they will start discussing in the or their views will be on the same platform. So, from the Center for Consciousness Studies, where I work in the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore, one of the most pioneer institute for the neuroscience uh, in India and as well as in the world. So, I give my the greetings from Center for Consciousness Studies, and I thank all the organizers and Dr. Ray for giving me this opportunity to moderate such a wonderful webinar today on this auspicious occasion of Swami Vivekananda's birth anniversary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra. Now it's my honor to introduce Brother Sankara. Brother Sankara is the current spiritual director and resident minister of the Vedanta Center of Atlanta. Swami Prabhavanand accepted Gary Camper as a disciple in 1973 and gave him the name Sankara in 1975. Swami Swananda initiated Brother Sankara in 1977. For the next 33 years, Brother Sankara continued his life as a householder and served as the Swami and the Vedanta Society of Southern California in various capacities, including Secretary of the Board of Trustees. He received Brahmacharya vows after his life of 48 years died in November 2009. In June 2010, Swami Swananda appointed Brother Sankara as resident minister of the Vedanta Center of Atlanta. He began serving here in August. Previously, under Swami Savananda's direction, Brother Shankara assisted in founding the Vedanta Center of Greater Washington, Vivekananda Retreat regularly, and Ramakrishna Vedanta ashrams in different places. He also helped establish several non-profit religious organizations, including American Service to India and the Ramakrishna Foundation. Over to you, Brother Shankara.
Thank you so very much. This is such an honor to participate in such an elevated discussion of Swami Vivekananda's role. In thinking about this, I decided to take the tack that not everyone would know about Swami Vivekananda's development of his role. And so before I start my prepared remarks, let me just say that Swami Vivekananda has been my hero since 1975, when I read the collection of talks published as Jnana Yoga. At that time, I implored Vivekananda to make me a part of what he was doing. Make me a part of this, I said. That prayer was graciously answered, and I suspect that that's why I am sitting here talking with you this afternoon. So about Swamiji and his role as he developed it here in the West. After his great success at the Parliament of Religions in September of 1893, Swami Vivekananda, most of the time I'll now call him Swamiji, Swamiji toured many parts of the US. His popularity offered the opportunity to speak on life and religion to what were often large, enthusiastic crowds. Major newspapers across the country loved to run stories on Swamiji. They had plenty to write about. His relentless schedule of talks, classes, and informal gatherings with society's elite earned Swamiji the title, that cyclonic monk from India. That cyclonic monk from India. For example, the New York Critique wrote, he is an orator by divine right, and his strong, intelligent face in its picturesque setting of yellow and orange was hardly less interesting than those earnest words and the rhythmical utterance he gave them. This is just one of many, many stories run along that line. By early 1895, weary after nearly 2 years of touring and speaking, Swamiji was grateful to find refuge at Thousand Island Park in upstate New York. He was invited there in the summer of 1895 by Mary Dutcher, an artist who had attended his spiritual classes in New York City. The park was a place that encouraged the exchange of ideas. Residents had created a setting that was friendly to contemplation and meditation. It had already attracted such speakers as Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. Yet Swamiji's experience of the park became significant in a very different way. Early in his stay there, for the second time in his life, he entered Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the state of full God realization, Brahmagyana. The first time was in India in 1886. At Kashipur, near Kolkata, a team of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples was providing round-the-clock care for the master during his last illness. Swamiji was their leader. Many years later, in 1898, Swamiji told this story to Swami Saradananda his brother disciple. One day in the Kashipur garden, I had expressed my prayer to Sri Ramakrishna with great earnestness. Then in the evening, at the hour of meditation, I lost consciousness of the body and felt that it was absolutely non-existence. I had nearly merged in the Supreme, but I had just a trace of the feeling of ego, so I could again return to the world of relativity from the samadhi. After that experience, when after trying repeatedly, I failed to bring it back, I failed to bring back the state of samadhi. On informing Sri Ramakrishna about it, he said, and this is a quote from the master, "If you remain day and night in that state, the work of the Divine Mother will not be accomplished. Therefore, you won't be able to induce that state again. When your work is finished, it will come again." The master said that when it did come, Swamiji could then leave the world at will. I'll repeat that. The master said that when it did come, that second samadhi, Swamiji could leave the world at will. But as we know, Swamiji did not go. He finished his retreat at Thousand Island Park, then stayed with us for another 7 years until July 4th, 1902. Most of those last 7 years were spent continuing his work here in the West. We get a glimpse of why Swamiji stayed on February 2nd, 1896. As a guest of the Brooklyn Ethical Association, Swamiji gave his lecture, The Atman. Toward the end of this talk, Swamiji paraphrases the Upanishads, saying, "He who in this world of many sees that one, he who in this mass of insentiency sees that one sentient being, he who in this world of shadows catches that reality, unto him belongs eternal peace, none else, unto none else, unto none else." Then during the question and answer period, a reporter remarked that Hinduism was not thought of as a proselytizing religion. Swamiji gave it a moment's thought and then replied, "I have a message to the West, as Buddha had a message to the East. And as we know, that message makes up most of the 9 volumes published as Swami Vivekananda's complete works." Swami Yogeshananda, the founder of this Atlanta center, wrote, "Swamiji fell in love with America. He said it was where his heart was, and he loved the Yankee land, as he called it. He said he liked to see new things, not the old ruins of Europe. He felt that America was the place, the people, and there was the place of opportunity for everything. He may have upset some people in London when he said, the American civilization is, in my opinion, a very great one. I find the American mind peculiarly susceptible to new ideas. Nothing is rejected because it is new. It is examined on its own merits." He told people in Calcutta, Kolkata now, America is where, more than anywhere else, the feeling of brotherhood has been developed. An American meets you for 5 minutes on board a train, and you are his friend. And the next moment, he invites you to be a guest at his house and opens his whole home to you. He said of American women, their kindness to me would take years to tell. They are the life and soul of this country, he said. I could never repay my debt of gratitude to them. Yet, as we can see from this incident, Swamiji intended to do so. In 1900, he told an American devotee in San Francisco, "See, I have to be born, I have to take birth again." He told an American devotee in San Francisco, "See, I have to take birth again." "Why?" Swamiji asked the devotee. "Because," he replied, "I have fallen in love with human beings." Because I have fallen in love with human beings. Swamiji's immense contributions to the intellectual and spiritual thought currents of this nation have not gone unnoticed. For example, during the celebration of America's bicentennial in 1976, Swami Vivekananda was honored by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. They published a book titled Abroad in America, which recognized him as one of the visitors from abroad during the nation's first 200 years who made a significant impact on our spiritual development. And then, of course, in 2013, during the celebration of the 150th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's birth, both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, two of the most prestigious and influential newspapers in the United States, published two-page spreads, 2 pages, 2 full pages of the newspaper, identifying Swami Vivekananda as the one who brought a great intellectual and spiritual thought current into America and vivified our sense of ourselves and of the possibilities. And just one other incident. When he was in Pasadena in 1899 and 1900, he encountered the Throop family, Throop, Throop family. They had something called the Throop Scientific Institute. Swamiji extravagantly encouraged them and said, "You must go forward with this." And as a, you could say, direct or indirect result of Swamiji's influence on the Throop family, that family helped found the California Institute of Technology. Some of you may know that that is where the great quantum physicist, Dr. Richard Feynman, taught and spent the really productive years of his professorial life. So with that, I'll close saying that Swamiji remains a hero to many, many of us and well deserves all of our heartfelt devotion and intellectual appreciation. Oma Satoma Satkamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amrutangamaya, Abir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from this realm of relentless noise and delusion to thine abode of serenity, silence. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of their wisdom and love. Lead us from whence through and through, light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thanks a lot, Brother Sankara, for such a wonderful speech. Now I would like to invite Mr. Ritesh Verma, IT head in American Academy of Yoga and Meditation, to give the vote of thanks on behalf of the organizing team. Ritesh ji, you are on mute. Kindly unmute yourself.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. It's a very good morning to all Indians, and good morning to all Americans, and good evening to all Indian families and all. It's given me immense pleasure to vote of thanks for this event to all dignitaries assembled here. I would like to thank our eminent speaker, Swami Atmipenanda ji and Brother Shankaracharya ji for this inaugural inspirational thoughts which we have provided during this long, even though this session was planned for 1.5 hours, but it went more than 2 hours almost. So I'd like to thank once again to our beloved chairman, Dr. Indranil Basuji, and AI members, and last not the least, which all that audience which we are for the last 2.5 hours they are watching. Once again, thanks to everyone.
I would like to thank all our speakers for this informative webinar today. We hope to see you again. As for our viewers, if you haven't watched our complete webinar, you don't need to worry. We have got it for you. Watch it on our Facebook or YouTube channels. Thank you for joining us. Please feel free to write to us on the email or contact number provided on the screen. To know more about our webinars and activities, log on to our website www.aaymonline.org. Keep watching us. Thank you. Namaskar.